Here we go. We're live. How are you all doing? Let me just sort my lighting out. I thought I had it sorted, but it's not, obviously. There we go. That's better. So, how are you all? Great to be back on live. Hopefully we've got a few people on and we're rolling. So, I think this is day 4 of being live and reading. I didn't make it yesterday because for various reasons. I was actually at a soul afternoon, getting a good bit of shaking that hoof on the dance floor and having a good time. So, yeah, not that this isn't a good time with you guys, because I do enjoy doing this reading, but it was just something different and finding my feet down in this area. So, here we are. This is going to be an interesting piece. This is still in chapter 4, but we're now at Ascension Island. And this is Fearless, the diary of an 18-year-old at war in the Falklands. And in the last week or so, I've actually sold 8 copies of this book. Taken it with me to networking events. And one person has bought 5, in fact 6 copies off me. So, yes, it's still selling. So, chapter 4. Clear lower deck. Sandy Woodward also decided to do the motivational speech to inspire us for the fight to come. We had cleared the lower deck and were gathered in the tank deck, amongst the tanks, weapons, ammunition, and men of war, the Royals and the Pongos. We were called to attention as he stepped through the hatch into the tank deck. He took his place on the boxes of ammo. As he stood above us, he started speaking. I cannot remember all he said, but I do remember the words. Take a look at the man either side of you, your friend, shipmate or comrade. You may never see him again after tomorrow. In terms of inspiration and motivation, this was both ineffective and even damaging to the men listening to them. I really despised him for those words. I was scared enough, but also nervous, excited, and raring to go, and suddenly, whoof! With those few words, he had brought me down to earth with a crashing thud. I looked at Bill sitting to my left, and he looked at me. We both said together, wanker. Reflecting now, my most charitable thoughts are that he was trying to bring reality to the situation, but in reality, all he did was heighten the fear that already threatened to overwhelm me at times. I didn't want to lose anybody, let alone Bill Byrne. Jeremy Larkin, in sharing his views with me, wrote, Sandy was a man of exceptional intelligence, not least amongst gifted people. Human relations were not his strong point. His ability, for instance, to empathise with the ship's company was lamentable, least of all on a clear lower deck. One could argue that Sandy was out of touch with the thoughts of his men, and we were his men under his command, though having studied leadership and coaching in my later life, I can fully relate to the words that Jeremy has used regarding the late Sandy Woodward, and recognise that my early thoughts also came from a level of immaturity on my part, of growing up. I also believe that having to do the rounds of such an immense task force could not have been easy for him, knowing that he had ultimate responsibility for sending these men into battle and, sadly, their deaths. Saturday, 17th. Anchored at 0800 Zulu at Ascension Island. Got relieved late, so I was on watch from 0400 to 0810. Not impressed. Did jack and cable flags. Saw some sharks. One hammerhead and one ordinary looking one. stacks of black sea piranha type thingies that will eat anything. I was looking forward to Hans to bathe. The waters around Ascension Island were amazing. The colour of the sea was a pure aquamarine, clear and clean. You could see down so deep. The water was teeming with sea life, including schools of hammerhead sharks. It was like watching a David Attenborough documentary. Wherever you looked, there were fish of one type or another. It was the first time I'd seen a hammerhead shark, and they really do look weird. Later, during our time at Ascension, we saw a school of 20 or more swimming around it. It was a beautiful sight and something very few people get the opportunity to see. One of the other fish around Ascension was the tough black piranha, a parrot type fish. They would leap on anything that was thrown into the water, throw a bit of bacon in, and the sea looked like it was boiling as the fish attacked it. The Chinese laundry that remained on board loved them. They were easy to catch and could be traded in with the adobe wallers for a couple of tinnies. A few of the lads also had fishing gear on board. There was plenty of exotic fish being caught and cooked fresh for scram by the chefs. I also got my first taste of shark during this time. Several were caught and served up for dinner. It was delicious. Good evening, Andrew. Love to see you on board. This was now to become a period of waiting for us. Waiting for other ships, waiting for diplomacy, waiting for news if we were going or not. It was never really boring because there was so much going on. There were ships joining on a daily basis, and we had thousands of signals to deal with in the MCO. Or up top on the bridge, we had ship and aircraft recognition training and constant training for action stations and emergency stations. As the various stuffed ships arrived, that's ships taken up from trade, the merchantmen, we had to exchange identities with them. Most had a naval contingent on board and were pretty good at responding, but some were painfully slow. And I often wondered if we were ever going to fire a shot across their bows as they got closer to the anchorage. There were times that the officer watch did nothing about our reports of ship sightings, as we should discover in a few days' time. Throughout this time, there were flying stations with stores and people moving around the various ships, and to Wide Awake Airport on the island. I think the Yanks called it Wide Awake as a joke because they were so slow in answering our radio transmissions, sometimes taking as long as 15 minutes to respond in the early days of the anchorage. 5. Chapter 5, The Long Wait. Sunday, the 18th. Still anchored. Had bit of panic stations. Submarine detected, believed to be Russian. All set to move off. The ops room wasn't ready. CCY not impressed. That's Communications Chief Yeoman. Not impressed. All bunts got rollicking off him. He doesn't think we know we're at war. Hermes, Invincibles, and others with the other task force group thinned out. All the ships and crew were at a much heightened state already. Some were jittery and reacted to the slightest thing. Sonar alerts were quite often eventually defined as whales or just rocky features on uncharted waters. But we weren't taking any chances. We weren't aware of any submarines due in the area, but this was a confirmed contact. We could only put it down to the Russians, as we knew most of the NATO movements and the Argentines didn't have the capability to travel this far. I don't know if it's a little bit of complacency on the Bunting's part, or just not knowing who is responsible for what. But when we were called to action stations on discovering the sub, the chief yeoman got into the ops room only to discover that the books and call signs, formations and other things that should be set up at a radio operator station were not done. He went ballistic. I don't know who is responsible for setting the operations room up, but I certainly wasn't detailed off to do it. and there were a lot more senior comms ratings than me to know what they were doing. I was usually detailed off to scrub the bridge wings or paint this or that. It didn't worry me because it meant I was up top getting the sun and sending or responding to flashing light signals. I really loved this part of the job. I did feel hacked off that the chief doubted our commitment to the task and what we were preparing for. We all worked hard as a team and made sure we were the best. This was a slip-up and it never happened again. I think that the Killick of the watch should have had the accountability for this and made it part of the handover process. Whatever the reason, it didn't happen, but after this, we were always ready. The command structure was such that the carriers were part of one task group and we were part of another, but we were all part of the same task force. As soon as the sub was detected, the carrier group upped anchor and went off to sea with their protection force. By moving around and adopting zigzag formations, this meant that the ships never stayed on a steady course and moved either by timing or by a visual signal order, so they were more difficult to attack by torpedo. We stayed where we were. The fact that we stayed at anchor also gave us an indication of what the senior commander task group thought of the amphibious units. I think he wanted to prove he could do the landings with his own carriers and helo force and not need us. Monday the 19th. LSLs rejoined us, making up our task group, still anchored. Tragedy struck, my beautiful tan had started peeling. Gone day worker from 2000 Zulu. Bill Byrne upset because not got a mention yet, so decided to mention him. Got another mailie from Kim. Got one yesterday and one from Dad. Great news from Kim, cheered me up no end. Morale on board still high, but mail is now censored. Lads a bit dischuffed. The LSLs, Sir Galahad, Sir Tristram, Sir Geraint, Sir Lancelot, Sir Belvedere, finally caught up with us. We generally could only make about 20 knots top speed, but the LSLs were even slower, travelling at only 12 knots. These ships were landing ships logistics, hence LSLs, but under the Royal Fleet Auxiliary flag. So commanded and manned by merchant navy with army contingents. They were part of our task group, and we were nearly a complete amphibious group now, but one major unit was missing, HMS Intrepid. She was our sister ship, and the two LPDs did 3 years on, 3 years off as Dartmouth training ship, DTS, and the amphibious role with the Royal Marines. Each ship took a break to go into refit for maintenance after their stint. Most of the older blokes on board had served on both. It seemed that if you had been on one, then you were destined at some point in your naval career to go on the other. But there was still a lot of intership rivalry between us. But generally it was good fun. During the summer, I always tend to go very brown. And in prolonged periods, in tropical sunshine, it can be difficult to tell what race I am just by looking at me. During my travels, I've been mistaken as a long-lost member of an Arab tribe in Sharjah. I got a great deal on a gold necklace, though. Italian, Spanish, Pakistan. And to top it all off, I was in Ritzi's in Portsmouth one night, and a group of Arabic naval officers that were visiting approached me and started asking me questions in Arabic. Abroad I could cope with it, but in my own port? Rarely did I peel and rarely did I use sunscreen. Far from it. Baby oil or vegetable oil with carrot juice was our preferred method of bronzing, with liberal amounts of chilled baby oil rubbed into the body as after sun. It generally worked, but I had not been so close to the equator as we were now, and even though I didn't go red, I obviously burnt at some stage, and my tan started peeling. I was horrified. Not sure why, because we weren't going to be in contact with any females for a while. As we were reasonably quiet at anchor, the chief yeoman decided to put in a relaxed watchkeeping system. This meant that he needed some people to work 9 to 5 as general dog bodies, and I was one of them. Whilst the other lads got to deal with signal traffic, those was on days were scrubbing, painting, sewing flags, and generally doing what we were told to do. It seemed like a good scheme, as we would get all night in for a while, until, of course, there were little things like refuelling or store ship, a RAS, replenishment at sea, to do late at night. I think this system lasted a whole 4 days before going back to normal. Bill Byrne had become one of my best mates since the time we were at Mercury together. We were in the same class and we used to practice our Morse together, ensuring we got through the test at the end and successfully passed out. On the passing out parade, my parents were late to arrive due to mishaps with the car they were driving. In fact, they were so late they didn't actually see me pass out or receive the captain's prize for the hardest working and most determined student. Bill's mum and dad and his sister Melanie took me under their wing until my parents arrived. Bill and I became very close, and our first 3 drafts together were SBS Chatham, May 1981, HMS Fearless in South Shields, September 1981, and Northwood, NATO Command Communications Centre, August 1983. Bill was slightly older than me, and I thought he was very cool. He taught me to dance. Just relax. Move your feet and just let it get into it. Introduced me to jazz funk and his own way of chatting up the ladies. He was quite good at it. We also got into trouble together. The first time was whilst at SBS Chatham in July 1981, 3 days before the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer. Bill and I had been to the Pembroke Bop and had a few too many to drink. We had our own cabin at HMS Pembroke, and somebody forgot to set the alarm. We were about 20 minutes adrift for our duty, and we reported to the leading reg. He gave us a bollocking, and we apologised, but we still had to see the Jossman. The Killick reg told us to be remorseful and apologise. We're quite relaxed down here, so long as you apologise to the Joss, you should get away with a bollocking and a bit of running around for him. We were really grateful for this piece of advice and fairly relieved. What I couldn't control, however, was my nervous smile that came across my face every time I was being told off. Remember, I'm only 17 at this stage. I didn't even know I was doing it half the time, but the person giving me the bollocking thought I was taking the mick, as did the Joss. And he actually told us both that he was going to let us off this time, but because Porter thinks it's so funny, you report to the commander's table at 0800 next day. I tried to explain and apologise, but he was having none of it. Bill was furious. Next day, we went in front of the commander and received 5 days number 9 punishments. 5 days extra duties, spud bashing, sweeping leaves, confined to barracks, which meant that our plans to go uptown in rig for the royal wedding were well and truly scuppered. We were the only 2 non-duty crew left on board that day, and to top it all off, Bill got turned into sick bay the day after the table with flu and didn't do any of his punishment. I was on my own. When we joined the Fearless in South Shields, we joined as a whole ship's company in a mass troop movement. The Navy had requisitioned a train and 500 matlows and booties travelled from London to Newcastle together. It was an interesting journey. On our first night in South Shields, the chief yeoman had organised a piss-up for us all to get to know each other. The details were published and rendezvous point was established. Bill, being Bill, was not going to turn up on time, as it was fashionable to be late. What choice did I have but to follow and support him? We turned up at the pub, having had a few on the way, to be greeted by the rest of the comms department, including the Senior Communications Officer, Lieutenant Commander Bill Whelan. He was sat at the bar lording it up, and we were introduced. SCO. Hello, I'm Lieutenant Commander Bill Whelan, but you can call me Sir. Evening, SCO. I'm R.O. Byrne, and you can call me R.O. Byrne. I just want the ground to open up and swallow me. Bill just didn't care. Our next scrape came later in '82 when we were in Venice. We didn't tend to go ashore to all the matelot traps and liked to experience the proper local culture and go around the back streets of the towns we visited. On this occasion, we were really having a cultural trip. Sadly, Bill's sister Melanie's fiancé had been killed in a vehicle accident a few weeks earlier. We were away, but Bill woke up one morning really agitated, saying that he had dreamt that Mel was calling him, and she was very upset. Later that day, he got a telegram informing him of the accident. Bill's a Catholic. His father was an Irish Scout and a great bloke. They really did look out for me. Bill wanted to go into a church, light a candle and say a prayer to pay his respects. I was fascinated by this and asked him why Catholics did this. He explained it to me, and I was truly moved by his emotions. We then proceeded into deepest, darkest Venice and found a nice family pizzeria that had a few old locals in, eating and drinking. Neither of us could speak Italian, but we managed to order some fantastic pizza and garlic bread with jugs of wine. We spent some time in there. I know this because we had 2 empty jugs of wine that had been filled up more than once, and the proprietor had shut up shop and left us in there alone with our wine and whatever snacks we had at the time. We'd drunk a few jugs by this time and decided it was time to leave. We knocked on the counter to try and attract somebody's attention so we could pay, and also called out through the door. No one came. We did what any honest drunken sailor would do. No, not do a runner, but left a few lire on the counter. Probably not enough, but it made us feel good, and walked out, shutting the door behind us. Up to this point, we had been in great form. Afternoon wine and fresh air is a great recipe for disaster, especially if one of you is feeling maudlin. Bill suddenly started having a go at me for taking the mickey out of him for lighting the candle. I tried to explain that I was genuinely interested and very moved by what he had done. It didn't help to calm him down. Instead, it made him worse. He started shouting and pushing me, and we were like 2 schoolboys. You hit me first. No, you hit me first. As if trying to protect ourselves if we got caught and then blame the other for starting the fight. In the end, I swung out and hit Bill. He hit me back, and I hit him again, catching him bang on the nose, which immediately started bleeding, and he started crying. Then I started crying for hurting him. And we were standing on this little bridge over a canal in Venice, crying and hugging each other because we'd hurt each other. I think a lot of this was also part of the crap we had gone through in the Falklands coming out now. We sorted ourselves out, and I realised my white shirt was now covered in blood. Bloody hell, Bill. How are we going to explain this? More tears. He then gave me his cardigan. Yes, we wore cardigans to cover most of it up, but there was plenty of blood still visible. It was decided that Bill had fallen up some stairs and I had to pick him up, which is how the blood came to be on my shirt. We got away with it. This was the first and only fight I had during my naval career. It didn't affect our friendship at that time, though sadly it did later on that year. Whilst at anchor, Mel was coming on board fairly regularly, and with this came an outbreak of morale. I was getting letters from all members of the family, separately as well as from people in Milham, wishing me well. Kim's letter contained the fantastic news that she was once again pregnant with my now nephew, Peter. After the dramatic events of February, this was a real lift to the family. We also got informed that as from today, any mail going off was to be censored. This meant that anything that we wrote could and would be read before being sent off to our nearest and dearest. The Padre and a couple of others were detailed off to go through our letters before they were sent off to the UK. This was because some pillock had heard about the D-Day date and thought he was important by letting those at home know. It still amazes me to this day that somebody can be as daft as that without realising they're putting 28,000 lives at risk. I know I may have had a head start being a communicator. You had to have a degree of intelligence to do that. But it is common sense. Wherever you go in basic training, there are posters all over the place. Careless talk costs lives. This was the days of the IRA, and I know the bootlegs weren't as hated as the paras by the IRA, but they should have known better. One of them must have let the date out of the bag from overhearing a conversation in the amphibious ops room, and the buzz on the ship was that it was a royal that done it. Tuesday the 20th. Canberra and Elk joined us at around 0700 off Ascension. Stacks of VS, that's visual signals, still very quiet. We turned the Elk, a roll-on, roll-off, or ro-ro ferry, into a flight deck. Our chief stoker and some of his team went over and cut the sides of the ship, opening up the upper scupper to become a flight deck. Not sure of the shipping company that owned the ship or that they would be happy to know we were doing this to her, but I watched fascinated as they cut away at the metal and let it drop over the side. It was an innovative piece of engineering design. Amazing what matlers can do when the need arises. No potential employer should ever turn one down for a job, or any service personnel for a job, because they can turn their hands to most things and are very flexible in their approach and attitude to work. Wednesday, 21st. Still not a lot happening. Had a RAS bracket cell, that's fuel, at about 22:30. Did a Vertret or stores party. See what I mean about day worker? I had to be on watch for the RAS, even though I should have finished at 1700. It really didn't take long for that idea to fall by the wayside. I was also discovered much later, in communication with the navigator, Commander John Prime, that the RAS took much longer than normal, as Fearless was down to 29% fuel. And we also lost a boiler. Not physically lost it, but it burnt out, blew out, on approach to the RAS. It took so long that we had to do a 180-degree turn to get us back on track. So my day working became a very long day indeed. Thursday, 22nd. All quiet on the home front. Friday, 23rd. Saw loads of dolphins in the sea playing about. Also one hammerhead. Got recognition training? No, I haven't. It's just been cancelled. Saturday, 24th. Nothing happening. Band concert from the Booties of Canberra. Boring. If nothing else, the band concert was an excuse for a few beers. The Royals put their heart and soul into the concert, turning out in full rig and doing a real last night at the proms affair. I think I was a bit young to really appreciate it, or I may have been put off by my dad, who used to play military band music on the radiogram at full volume when he came home from the sergeant's mess on a Saturday and Sunday afternoon whilst we were in Germany. Probably the former, as I now own a mass band of the Royal Marines Beating the Retreat CD. Captain Jeremy Larkin writing in Tales from the Hot Seat. During a trip to the Caribbean earlier in the year, we embarked for a short visit the Commander-in-Chief Admiral Sir John Fieldhouse. He enjoyed a traditional ship's company concert held on the vehicle decks in which 500 voices nearly lifted the flight deck heavenwards with Hearts of Oak and Royal Britannia. The Admiral turned to me and said, without conceivable premonition, "What if we were to go to war tomorrow?" And then, referring to the same concert mentioned in my diary, we took the moral pulse from day to day. One evening, during our 3-week pause at Ascension Island, the very same Royal Marine Band that had unleashed such carefree enthusiasm but 2 months previously boarded to give a concert. The event was well attended but subdued. Concerned at first, I concluded correctly that sober stock was being taken of our prospects. We accepted that our likely fate was to sail south to the Falklands to face hazards new to us all. So perhaps for me, that concert wasn't boring at all, just that our thoughts were probably somewhere else. Thank you for listening. And Peter Isaacs there. Good. Mentioned you in this, Peter. So same time tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I will hang around to chat. Tomorrow will be chapter 6 called Sloppiness. And I'll explain all that tomorrow. But lovely to see you on here, Peter. Because it was a day we heard, or I heard news, that you had been conceived. So, hi Debbie, lovely to see you. Yes, well, four people, Pete, and you're on here, so that's the start, innit? We got to keep going. Just keep those people coming in, and keep sharing it, whether it does or whether it doesn't. Somebody might get something out of it. That's how I look at it. So. You should put the speaker on for the children, mate. They'll sleep. Trust me. So there you go. Right. Anybody got any questions, comments, observations, thoughts? Apart from my nephew, Peter Isaac. So there we are. Right. Okay. I shall love you and leave you right now. There's 4 on. Who are the 4? Who's the 4th one? Can I see that? 5 viewers. Just as I'm coming to an end, they're all coming in. Lousy time, but I can't see who they are. So just say hello, everybody who's just popped in as I finished. 6. See, they're all coming, Peter. See, you've started something, mate. Hello, who have I got with me? Not Peter, Debbie, or Andrew. Anybody going to say hello? All right. Well, it's getting out there, isn't it? That's the important thing. So, same time tomorrow evening. Everybody take care now. Bye.